Coming up in this hour, I'm going to talk more about those first migrants arriving on channel boats yesterday, probably the ones who were watched by Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. He was live on the show from the channel yesterday after just watching the boats, the French Navy escorting a bunch of people in their dinghies to the British Navy, who then took them and then rather outrageously, I thought, asked for the life jackets back so they can use them for the next lot. Quite extraordinary, that. But we should hand them back with the migrants in them, should we not? But those first migrants have been detained, and apparently those are going to be some of those who will be returned to the French, in return for which we will take someone who's a legitimate asylum seeker from France. Do you believe those people will ever actually leave this country? Won't they just start the human rights challenges, which, despite what a lot of government ministers have said in the last few weeks about this, and certainly this week, actually still just as many new legal challenges are allowed under human rights legislation, that they will just simply never actually be sent home. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. We'll get to your calls in the next 20 minutes or so. Also going to be talking about Donald Trump. He says he's going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin as early as next week, and possibly the two men might meet with Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine as well to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine. How hopeful are we of that? Plus, we're going to talk more about those civil servants working at the tax office at HMRC who spent an hour attending a seminar on the guilt of being British during working hours, while hundreds of thousands of calls from taxpayers go unanswered every single month. Plus, we're going to be talking about why council tax may well be going up to pay for some of that black hole that Rachel Reeves has found, but also to basically help poorer areas by putting taxes up for households in wealthier areas. But you may not be one of the wealthier households in that wealthier area, but will you still face your taxes going up? Plus, in half an hour's time, I'm going to be chatting to the infamous Bonnie Blue. Her real name is actually Tia Billinger. She's a controversial porn star. She shot to fame after her public challenge on OnlyFans to sleep with I don't know why someone wrote sleep with, to have sex with 1,000 complete strangers in 12 hours. Why am I talking to her? Well, not to publicise what she does. Trust me, she's making millions. She doesn't need my help with that. But I want to know why so many young women just like her think that selling their bodies for sex to complete strangers is a completely ordinary and normal and just fine thing to do. If the money's big enough, will you do anything for it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But a lot of people very cross online about me interviewing her. Oh, don't give her publicity. Quite a lot of abusive language as well. And she says she does get a lot of abuse and death threats. Indeed, needs to have security to be in public as a result of it. You might say, oh, well, she deserves it. Well, I don't think anyone deserves to get any abuse or death threats or physical threats. But I've got a top tip. Maybe listen to the interview before you have a judgment on the interview. Maybe that's an idea. You might have seen the Channel 4 documentary. You might pretend you don't know about Bonnie Blue. You might not know about Bonnie Blue. You might know about Bonnie Blue. But I'm interviewing Tia Billinger, who kind of plays Bonnie Blue. She says they're the same person, but are they? I want to find out. We're going to be talking about that. Of course, there may be some language that a lot of people might not want their children to hear. I know it's the summer school holidays, so maybe between 11:30 and 12, you might want to, perhaps if you've got kids around, not have a very much. I'll give you that warning before 11:30 as a reminder as well. But, you know, it's an interview that I want to do, and I think it's going to be worth listening to. Trust me, I've done this for a long time. Benjamin Butterworth is also with me today, journalist and broadcaster. Just wondering, do you think we shouldn't be interviewing someone because someone's doing something we may or may not disapprove of and making a lot of money, and it's something that a lot of people consider to be immoral? Should we just go, well, don't talk about it, then it's not happening? No, because that's not how a free society works. But also, you know, it really is a cultural phenomenon. It's not just Bonnie Blue. She's the person that's become famous and remarkably wealthy. But actually, there are huge numbers of young women and young gay men who are doing this as a career. They're doing it to top up their normal salaries. And for all the people, you know, for a handful making millions, as Tia Billinger is, there are many people making just thousands replicating the same behaviour. And so you sort of start to ask questions about, is this actually what you want society to look like? Is it morally justified? The thing I would want to say is that, does it not tell us a lot more about men than it does women? Oh, completely. Absolutely. I think that's the really interesting thing, but also some of the way she speaks about herself, which I find very distressing. But maybe I'm just Mary Whitehouse now. now? I don't know. But anyway, we're going to be talking about that with her a little bit later on. Let's talk about these migrants being detained. One in, one out is the deal. It came into force on Wednesday afternoon. Some migrants were detained. We're told they were facing deportation to France. People are always detained when they get off those boats. There's, who are you? What's your, where are you from? And then you're sent off to a hotel. They're no longer allowed to detain people. That's why they're in hotels. And then they move from hotels to what would have been otherwise family homes, which then British people don't get to live in, because they can't be. The human rights law has got involved, and you can't just detain people for the length of time it takes to actually deport anybody. Otherwise, people would be sitting in detention camps for years on end. That's the argument. The argument, of course, is to get rid of them sooner, and you need to change human rights laws at home and abroad for that. But these people are being detained. We're told some of them will be deported. Do you believe a single one of these, let's face it, young men are going to ever be sent home to France? And does that in any way solve the problem when we're going to get someone back from France? No doubt they'll choose a very sort of, heartwarming case of a woman with her 3 young children, a widow or something, as a case of someone who's a genuine asylum seeker. And then we'll go, oh, well, of course, we'd rather have her than a 22-year-old young man who's come illegally on the boat. But does this solve the problem? Have the government really grasped what the actual concern of the British public is?
Well, I think some people will be deported under this. The problem is that when the maximum could be 50 a week and you've got 800 a day sometimes coming into the country, well, that isn't dealing with the problem on any serious scale. And I don't think that's what the British public are asking for. They're asking for something rather more dramatic. I also think, maybe it will free up some of the cost, because if these people are being processed in France and applying in France online as they will, well, that'll be some people that aren't in hotels, that aren't with caseworkers. So it'll probably save a small amount of money. But all of this is, for want of a better phrase, a drop in the channel, right? It's not dealing with the serious issue.
But do you think that's because Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper and others, they don't really get it? This is my argument I've been making for months. They don't actually think it's a problem. They're playing along with, well, everyone else seems to think it's a problem. We're down in the polls. Maybe we should do something. But they don't actually think it's a problem. I think the Tories, a lot of them, not all of them, thought it was a problem. We're just too hopeless to do anything about it and too lily-livered.
I do think that they understand it's a problem. I don't believe that they simply accept that these people are coming across, because, people die in the Channel, right? It's horrific.
Do you know what?
And it's
I don't care anymore. And I know that sounds really terrible. I no longer care. It's been publicised enough now that this is a dangerous route. If you decide to put yourself, you're looking at that dinghy. I've been on like one of those sort of, those kind of boats when there's been like 6 of us on those kind of boats going from the mainland to the Isle of Wight. It was bleeding terrifying, absolutely terrifying on just the waters there. The idea that I would get on a dinghy, which is clearly meant for, I don't know, 10 people, and there are 50 or 60 of us
80.
piled on, 80 in some cases now, all the way there. They've got mobile phones. They can look up. What is the distance? Is it just a little lake I'm going across? Let's stop thinking these people are all stupid. They've got mobile phones. They know what they're doing. If you choose to get on one of those rickety dinghies, I'm sorry, I don't think you're my problem or my responsibility. And if you're in front of me, I would try and stop you from drowning. I don't want people to drown. I think the parents who put little kids on should be sodding well sent to prison for the rest of their lives, putting their children's lives at risk.
But doesn't it tell you how desperate they are? That
no,
they do it
they're
even...
in France. They're in France. I'm desperate to go to France.
But I think these people are desperate.
They're not desperate.
And many of them...
They might have been desperate when they left Syria or something, but they're not desperate by the time they've reached any part of Europe.
Well, the main nationality at the moment is Sudanese. And, we talk about Gaza. The worst famine in the world is in Sudan. It's in its capital, Khartoum.
Well, these young men don't look very starving.
And so these people are in horrific situations.
But the women and the children aren't.
Yeah, of course.
The elderly and the women and the children, they miraculously somehow cope with living in Sudan or Eritrea or Somalia or Afghanistan, but the men leave.
I mean, huge numbers of people in Sudan are dying from famine.
But we don't care about them. They're not in Gaza, and it doesn't involve Israel. You know that.
Indeed,
you know
no one talks about it. But I point that out because many of these, at the moment, most of these migrants are Sudanese. That's the top nationality.
So you leave Sudan because there's hunger and there's civil war and everything, and there's many other countries that have that. You leave those countries. Well, the moment you've left that country, You're no longer desperate, are you?
But hang on,
You're somewhere safe.
But by that logic, it would mean that the countries that happen to be closest to there would take hundreds and hundreds
That's literally how it works. That's why Poland has got all the people from Ukraine, and that's why that's why Jordan has got loads of Palestinians. This is and if Ireland were invaded, they would all come to Britain or whatever. That's what happens. Yes.
I'm afraid I think we have a moral responsibility.
Well, I don't have a moral responsibility to people in Somalia. No, I don't. I don't.
I think people that are fleeing persecution, you have a moral responsibility.
We're not fleeing persecution. You're saying they're hungry and they're living in a basket case civil war country. Well, yes. Well, why don't you try and help sort out your own country?
I mean, that's fine. Actually, the thing that would fix these things would be for them to develop economically, and maybe if they didn't have so many wars, that would stop them wanting to flee. Because many of these people, they don't really want to leave their country. They just feel like it's the only way to get a quality of life. They would gladly go back.
And I understand. And if I were in their position, I would probably want to do the same. However, British people do not have a duty of care to the other 7 billion people on the planet who want to come for a better life in Europe or America.
So you don't think that we should take 100,000 or 50,000 refugees a year? You don't think that we should take a similar number to Germany or France or Spain?
No, I don't think we should make policy based on something that Germany did. By the way, Germany has virtually tried to close their border to a lot of the asylum seekers. I think a lot of the people who are travelling are not the people who are most in need. I think we should absolutely look at. I think we're all very welcoming for mothers and children coming out of Ukraine to keep their children safe when Putin first invaded, with a view to them going home later on, which many of them already done.
What's different between someone fleeing Kiev and someone fleeing Khartoum?
Because we're talking about particularly a war in Europe, and I do say, yes, I think in Europe we have more of a duty of care to people closer to home.
Just the same.
Well, they're all human. Well, okay. There are, was it 8 billion people on the planet right now? So we have a duty of care to them. Most of the people on the planet right now have a worse quality. I know our country's a bit rubbish at the moment. Most people on the planet have a worse quality of life than us. Lots of billions of people live in a country where they are struggling every day to feed their children. Billions of people don't have the same human rights we have. They don't have equality. Billions of women, don't have equal rights. Billions of, hundreds of millions of gay men and gay women don't have equal rights. Do we have a duty of care for all of them to come and live in our country? I would say we should do that colonial thing of trying to actually impart our Western values to those countries, but then we're told off for doing that.
But if that's the argument, then why would you still take people from Ukraine? That's my point.
But that's on a temporary basis.
But you're saying...
That's women and children on a temporary basis while that war is ongoing, and lots of those have already gone home.
I mean, but the argument is, if you say that we can't take the world's ill, then how are you choosing who you do take? Because
we take closer to home.
Frankly, people in Khartoum, we
have a duty. Well, we did have a duty of care to Ukraine because we actually signed a treaty guaranteeing Ukraine's safety when they gave up nuclear weapons. So we do have a duty of care towards Ukraine.
But also, there are lots of people in Afghanistan who fought with our troops and were translated.
Yeah, and we have a duty of care to them. Most British people agree with that. Right, but not any Tom, Dick or Mohammed or Harry who wants to come over.
But at the same time, Afghanis have a very high number of sex crimes against women conducted compared to other nationalities. And so lots of people say, you shouldn't take any Afghanis by that logic, right?
Well, I think that I don't say we shouldn't take any. But there's a difference between people from Afghanistan who've come over on the boats who are living here and people who have come over through the scheme where they have been working side by side with British soldiers, and we promised them we would keep them safe. That's a completely different group of people. I like to think, maybe I'm wrong, but I like to think.
I think it's a fantasy, first of all, to say that you just can't take anybody from around the world. I think we have a moral responsibility, and also
where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? I mean, you're saying, this is where the left goes. This is that whole but we've got duty of care to everybody, and they've got worse lives than us. Okay, so we'll take those 40 women and children, and then we can feel better about ourselves, pat ourselves on the back, and I don't know, put a ribbon or a flag in our Twitter bio, and then we're virtually signaling. But that doesn't actually solve the problem that these countries are facing. Most of these problems need to be solved. The people basically, you've got war-torn countries, you've got organised criminals, you've got kleptocratic leaders, you've got religious nutters. That's not solved by us taking the people all the victims. We can't take all the troubled people of the world. We don't have enough room. We're full.
But that's why I think you should have things like quotas to accept a certain number each year.
And then sod the rest of them.
Well, yeah, you have to.
That's what you're basically saying. So the rest
you
of it.
clearly have to draw the line somewhere, evidently, because there are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people in this situation. But the idea somehow that you shouldn't take any, that you shouldn't feel any debt
these people. We should take some, but in particular circumstances, people who've been politically persecuted and others. We do already do that.
But the people coming over in the boats, as I say,
they're young
are from the
men.
worst famine in the world. They have been through atrocities. You know, Sudan is a horrendous situation.
And they've left their mothers, their sisters, their daughters. They've left them to starve and get beaten and raped by the... Yeah, these are great men. We absolutely want...
It's not their fault
But they don't travel with their women, do they? They leave the women and the weakest and the youngest and the eldest to their plight. Why should we care about them? They don't care about their own families.
But as you said earlier, when they get here, they can bring their relatives. So maybe they're not doing it to be selfish. They're doing it because it's the
goodness
anchor.
of their little hearts.
I think it's pretty grim to talk about people from this horrific situation as though they are opportunistic rather than
they
trying
want to come here for a better life. And if I were them, I'd want to do the same. I don't think at the same time them wanting a better life is my duty. There are people in Britain who want to have a better life. They go, oh, I don't want to go to work and do a boring 9-to-5 job. I want to claim benefits and not have to go to work to get the same amount of money. Well, fine, that's great. I love you want a better life by doing nothing, but I don't have a duty of care to you.
But as I said, you know, by that argument, you wouldn't take Ukrainians. And let's be honest.
No, that's not. We have a duty of care to Ukrainians because we signed a treaty.
But that was a political decision, just like this could be. You know, someone in Lviv, for example, on the European side of Ukraine, has not been particularly affected by the war.
No, and they went home. People went to Lviv and stayed in Lviv.
And yet they would have a right to come here. But someone in the midst of a horrific civil war and famine in the capital of Sudan would have no right. That doesn't feel like a fair way to distribute it.
Well, but again, let's have a duty of care to everyone all around the world. Or why don't the countries neighbouring those countries have a duty of care to them? I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest number of Ukrainian refugees, women and children, actually they've gone to Poland by a huge percent. Neighbouring countries do end up taking, same as Jordan taking the Palestinians and the like. That is Turkey taking Syrians. That's how it works. That's the real world. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I wonder whose side you're on.